Start.
Just read Meridian and
Be
Meridian. If there's still active shooting, we'll take the Bearcat, head that way.
39.
Upper Sioux, going to be Locust Grove and U-Stick, and they just put out a shot flyer, just, on the route.
This is a 1032 podcast where we interview experts in firearms and training with law enforcement, military, and competitive shooting backgrounds. All right, so back at it again. I've been off the air for a little bit, and I'm here with my friend Jimmy Koller.
Yeah,
how's it going, Jimmy?
Me. It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was been thinking, different names, people to have on the air here, and I saw a clip of a podcast that you were on. I was like, oh yeah, I got to get Jimmy on here. He had an OIS years ago,
yep.
And thought we'd get you on here, talk a little bit about that. What was the podcast that you were on?
So it's called the Good Things Spotlight. My cousin does it. She just wants to put some good things out in the world, and she's not doing it for profit or notoriety or anything like that. She's just
not like me. I'm doing this for profit and notoriety.
I know, right? Yeah. No, she's doing it. She's just trying to be a light to the world, and help make a difference in somebody's life.
So she's trying to put out things that are positive stories, positive outcomes.
Yeah. People that everybody's got their own cool experiences, and I think that's what she's doing is digging down into people that she knows and tapping into their experiences and how they can offer something beneficial to somebody else that might be listening.
Yeah, I saw some clips of that, and I actually went and researched it on YouTube, and I watched the whole thing.
Yeah, thanks.
You look pretty good on video.
Thanks.
Typically I have guys that don't look so good on video, so that's why I do audio only.
Yeah, it was professional video, so...
Did you get makeup?
No makeup, but it was professionally done, so...
Well, you look better on the video than you do here in person.
Thanks.
So.
I appreciate that. I got some sun now, too, so I'm definitely looking better today.
So how long have you been in law enforcement now?
So I've been a cop for 17 years. Yeah,
okay.
I started in 2006, I think is when I took the oath as a reserve officer with Rexford Police, and I've been doing it ever since.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what positions have you worked?
I was a meter maid starting out.
Yeah?
Yeah, I did that.
I'll bet you look good in a maid outfit.
Yeah, it was awesome. Writing parking tickets at BYU, Idaho. Did that for a while, and then did private security for the college there while I was a reserve officer. So I've been patrol my entire career, and I handle a narcotics detection canine. I've been doing that for 4 years. So really, it's patrolling canine.
Yeah.
So
that's where it's at in towns like ours, though.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you're smart and decide you want to investigate crimes and work day shifts, but it's pretty tough. Sometimes we say that kind of stuff jokingly, but I think I would stress out having a caseload like some of these detectives have. They have a lot of cases on their desks.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to be at the end of your day. You might have something holding for the next day or week or something like that, but every day you start, there's nothing to do. You go find something to do, or calls come at you and you just deal with them.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. You're an Idaho native, right?
No, I'm not.
No?
No, I grew up in Southern California.
Oh, man. I don't know if I
know.
Maybe I should have found somebody else today.
To my benefit, though, I've lived in Idaho longer than any other state. So I've been here since 2005. I was in California till I was 12. My parents saw the crime and saw how shitty it was there and said, yeah, let's get our family out of here.
So you guys came here before it was cool?
We went to Washington before it was cool, and my parents and my sister still live there, and I moved to Idaho in 2005. So yeah, I came here before it was cool.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised here. I like to be able to say that.
I know, right?
But I remember, before COVID and the big rush to move here, I'd travel places and people would make fun of you for being from Idaho. They're like, oh, we're a bunch of rednecks, or, why would you want to live there? There's nothing to do there. There's nothing there. It's just like, I never moved out of the state because I like rural living. I like hunting. I like fishing. I like, the going outdoors and not having to worry about seeing a bunch of other people. But that's changing. That's changed a lot in the last few years since COVID happened. Kind of changed the whole state, really.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do real estate on the side, and it's been crazy how much influx of building and people moving here there is. It is definitely changing the landscape of Idaho in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, and tell me, so then you grew up and went to high school down there in eastern Idaho then?
I went to high school in Washington, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to high school, and then went on a mission for my church, and then I stayed home for about a year. And then after that, I went out to BYU, Idaho, got my undergrad, met my wife, and then started working there.
And you worked for the PD there?
Yeah,
Okay.
works for PD.
And did you enjoy working there?
Dude, I loved it there. It was awesome. It was like a family. I know they say, oh, it's like a family, but it truly was. You got to know the officers, their wives, their kids. It was a good place to work. I didn't really want to leave. I just needed more money, so that's why I left and went to where I am now.
Yeah, I remember even, the agency I retired from here in Ada, it seemed like it was like that for many, many years, and it seemed like the last few years before I retired, it got to where, you call for an assist, dude rolls up, and you're like, in uniform, and I'm like, never seen that guy before.
Yeah, it still is like that. I mean, especially when I was training here for a while, and once I got out, now you see people that show up on the street or they drop names, and you're like, I've never met that guy. I don't know who they are.
Yeah, I miss those days. That was nice, to get to know everybody. So, what got you interested in law enforcement?
I'd always wanted to be in law enforcement. As a kid, I really wanted to be like a CIA spy. That was always really enticing to me.
Spy kids.
Man, I just loved the notion of like being clandestine and going and gathering information and doing cool stuff, kind of in the shadows. That was really what I was kind of striving for. I hoped that I was going to get, when I served my mission, I was going to learn a language so I could use that. And when I was in college, actually, CIA clandestine service, National Clandestine Service came out, did a seminar, and I got super interested. I was still super interested, and I started pursuing that a little bit. And then, because I didn't have a foreign language, it was going to be like, no, sorry, you're kind of really not what we're looking for. Yeah. And they wanted attorneys and accountants anyway.
So you didn't get to learn a language when you went?
No, I went English speaking, so I didn't learn any cool languages. But anyway, so I did law enforcement as a stepping stone to get into federal work. I went through as far as the polygraph, so basically the last step with a 3-letter agency I won't name because they're not well liked, and I was told that I'd failed the polygraph even though I was telling the truth, and I was like, you know what, screw these guys, this is stupid, and so I looked at another 3-letter agency that was a little less than the other one, and anyway, so I went with them and the current agency I'm with, and I said, hey, whoever gives me an offer first is who I'm going to go with. And so the current place I'm with now just said, yep, we'll offer it first. And so I went with them, and now I have no plans to leave.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, you're in a good place, I think.
Yeah, I like it where I'm at.
Yeah,
it's good.
Even though I've been retired for 3 years, I'll bet I've tried to recruit a dozen people, since I get, I'll see some college kid or whatever, and I'm like, hey, what are you going to do with your life? I'm looking for this job, I'm not sure what I want to do. Or some are like, oh, I'd like to go into law enforcement. Man, I'm always pushing the Ada County thing. So
yeah. Being a cop's a good thing, man. It can provide a lot of direction and give people some value in life.
Yeah, it was a good 30 years for me, and I worked for a couple different agencies, but I did my last 20 with Ada County, and even though there was days when I was kicking rocks and I was like, I hate this place, but looking back, you have your ups and your downs, and there's times when everybody's morale is up, and everybody's talking about how this is the greatest agency ever. We get the best pay, we got the best equipment, right? Best everything, and then 4 or 5 years later, people are saying, "Oh, this place sucks," and people want to leave, all that kind of stuff. And then a few years later, it turns back around, and it's just kind of like this roller coaster. So you got to, especially if you're a younger guy, you got to realize that those things are going to happen no matter how good your morale is and how great everybody thinks the department is at the time. You're gonna have some lows, and then it'll go back up again, and you got to ride those out.
Yep, for sure. That is probably the biggest thing on getting through a full career in law enforcement is knowing that it sucks right now, but I know it's going to get better too. So. Yeah,
and I'm sure you've seen it too, right? Pay and benefits.
Benefits.
Yep. And some days are just like, man, the other agency across the road, they have better benefits and pay, and then your agency will get a raise, and then they get one, and it's just kind of back and forth. I think they just fight over having the right number of employees and keeping
Yep.
everybody happy. And it's not always hard or that easy. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so how we're going to talk about an officer involved shooting you had with your previous agency, and I believe that was a day shift, right? And that was an armed robbery of some sorts.
Yeah, it was an armed robbery, middle of the day. Well, not middle of the day. It was about 5 o'clock in the
Yeah.
afternoon, just before 5.
And had you ever been involved in a OIS prior to that?
Nope, that was my first one.
Okay, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you've learned, like most of us. Anytime we're through some kind of critical incident, whether it's a shooting or just a fight or whatever, right? You kind of always look back and have lessons learned, and so hopefully you'll be able to tell us a few things that you feel like you could have done better,
Yeah,
or maybe not. Sometimes there's things like, man, there's just nothing else I could have done,
yeah,
and you could have, I'm sure we both know guys who've had multiple OISs, and everyone is completely different,
yeah,
right? And this is where sometimes I'm in the training industry, I guess. I train law enforcement, do some law enforcement contract work, and then I teach concealed weapons courses, things like that. But one of the things I hate when I hear other officers, they will die on a specific technique just because it helped them one time, but you listen to the guys who've had multiple shootings, and it's always different.
yeah.
So just one technique isn't gonna help you every single time. You just got to be good at lots of things. You got to be good, at drawing your gun. You got to be good at reloads. You got to be good at shooting on the move. You got to be good, and more than that, you got to be a good decision maker.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
making sure you make the good decisions. So there's a lot that goes into it, and there's not just one thing that goes with it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your day prior and leading up to that shooting
Yeah.
that day.
So it was
It was on a day shift, you said, right?
Yeah, it was on a day shift. It was kind of a wild 2 days. So the previous day, I was on day shift, just cruising around. I was getting my car washed, and a call pops up on the screen for a suspicious vehicle. And the call notes were just kind of weird. It was some local guy that said, hey, this guy is trying to abandon this silver 4Runner. And I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of weird, right? So I was headed over there. I was kind of in the middle of town. It was on the southern part of town.
Just kind of a suspicious person call?
Yeah, a suspicious vehicle. The caller thought that the person was trying to abandon this silver 4Runner with Montana plates. And he thought it was kind of strange. He said there was 2 guys outside kind of milling about. It was weird. So I head out there. As I've headed out there, my buddy Ben Johnson goes en route with me. He was on day shift with me, and as we're headed out there, dispatch gets us on the radio. And back then, we did everything over the primary channel. So if dispatch needed information, they just did over the primary channel. If you needed to run information, you just ran it all over primary.
So you ran driver's license, license plates, warrants checks, all on one
Everything
channel.
on one channel, yeah. We could go to a side channel if needed to. It was called a TAC channel, where they would encrypt it if they need to give sensitive information over the air, but most of the time everything was on that channel.
Okay.
So dispatch gets us on the radio and says, hey, I think this guy that's with the vehicle is just calling in and said he's trying to smuggle some stuff into Idaho and wants to turn himself in. And so that kind of raised up our,
So it was the same guy calling?
It was the dude, the subject of the vehicle had called into dispatch. Okay. So now we had 2 callers on the same call. And this guy's calling in and saying he's trying to turn himself in and that he got caught smuggling stuff. And anyway, long story short, me and Ben go there and we pull up. It's January. It's cold in East Idaho. It's snow covered.
Is it ever warm there?
No. It's always windy, and it's always windy no matter what time of year. But it was just cold. And there's these 2 guys outside this 4Runner, and there's a dog cage and a black bag inside this dog cage, like a black garbage bag. And these 2 dudes are out there. They're obviously cold. They've been outside for a while. They're shivering. We put them in we do a felony stop because we didn't know what it was. So they're at gunpoint, controlled situation. We control all their movements. We bring the first guy back. His name was Leland. Bring him back to us. I've got him in the standing prone position, hands on top of his head. And I ask him, well, what are we doing here? And he goes, you see that dog crate over there? I said, yeah. He's like, well, there's 20 pounds of marijuana in that bag, that garbage bag. And I look at Ben, who's paying attention downrange, And he like glances over at me, and I just start like laughing. I thought it was hilarious. Like, there's no way there's 20 pounds of weed in that bag, dude. I'm like, all right, man, well, whatever. You're under arrest if that's the truth. So I hook him up, throw him in my car. We do the same thing with his buddy. His name was Holland. Do the same thing. Holland doesn't really say anything. And so we, by this time, we've got like SROs. Our captain has showed up. Like, there's a bunch of people there. And anyway, we sure enough, there's 21 pounds of weed in this bag. They were so paranoid.
There really was that
20,
much weed.
There was 21 pounds of weed in this bag. Yeah, this big, huge 55-gallon garbage bag. 21 pounds of weed in it, all in individual pound bags. And anyway, in talking to him, he had thought that the gig was up for a lot of reasons that made sense to him. And if somebody else that was in his shoes would make sense to them on why they thought that the cops were onto him. To my knowledge, there was no cops onto him, and they literally just pulled off their first exit in Rexburg, like took the first exit, and then the next right turn they could, and stopped the car and sat there for probably like an hour.
So they were just being paranoid from being on drugs or something?
I think they were like recreational weed users, but they hadn't smoked any of it.
Is there another kind?
No, yeah, I know, right? I guess there's medicinal, recreational. I don't know how you.
That's true.
How do you categorize
That's true.
it? Yeah.
So were these guys? Were they were just traveling through town?
Yeah, they were doing a run from for a drug lord, whatever you call him, up in Montana. It was a green state at the time though, so I don't know why they did this run, but they did a run from Montana. I think they were in Bozeman down to Watsonville, California. Did a like 30-second turnaround time and came right back. And then, I mean, it's day and a half down, day and a half back. So by the time they got up, they they slept for like 3 days. They're eating garbage, food, energy drinks spewed throughout, like sleep.
Sound like a cop.
I know, right? Yeah,
except for the marijuana, but all the eating, all the poor eating, and
the paranoia and the energy drinks and the no sleep. Yeah. So these guys turn themselves in, right? So we deal with that the rest of the day. The next morning, I was on SWAT at the time, so it was about 4.
And that was a part-time team, and collateral. So you're a full-time patrol at the time, and your collateral duty is SWAT.
Part-time SWAT. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. It was a fun gig. We didn't have a lot of call-outs because it was East Idaho. We didn't get that many, but it was good. It was still gave me a lot of valuable tools and information. Yeah, good training when we could train. So we had a SWAT call-out that next morning, early in the morning. This dude had come up from Jefferson County with this chick. There was some elements of hostage situation. She escaped. They went to a hotel.
So real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So before that, these guys that were in the car, you guys ended up arresting these guys?
Yep.
Taking them to jail?
Yeah, they got charged with drug trafficking. Yeah.
Okay. And then now you're on to a second call.
Now we're on a completely separate call. I was off duty, got called out by SWAT. Anyway, that developed over the course of the night until they finally deploy SWAT.
Yeah, so you're just talking about, hey, this is what my day was like leading up to
leading up to the shooting. So get called in a couple hours early, go do the SWAT thing, ended up resolving that peacefully, get him in custody and booked away. And then the rest of that day, so this was a Friday morning leading to a Saturday morning. So Saturday is when the incident occurred. We're just at the PD doing paperwork. We had a bunch of evidence to book, and I was writing my report from the previous day's drug trafficking investigation. So it's about 4:45, 5:45, something like that. It was in the afternoon. We get tones, which we didn't get tones a lot. With our current where we currently live, we get tones a lot, and you get used to them. Yeah. But we got tones, and that was really kind of rare.
And tone is what dispatch puts out, right? It's like a little siren that comes over your radio and says, hey, everybody listen up. We got an emergency call where you're going to probably have to run lights and sirens too.
Yeah. We didn't get tones very often. So we got tones. Everybody peaks up, and dispatch puts out that there was a robbery at the Walgreens just down the street. So in Rexburg, everything's on a grid system, north, south, east, west. And the PD was it was right at the center of Main Street and Center Street. Right there at the heart of Rexburg, and the Walgreens was a block and a half away. So we were super close. They put out this armed robbery at the Walgreens, and so we spill out. A bunch of us are just at the PD, so we all spill out the back door. get in our cars, and literally we turn around, get on the main street, and then we're like right there, almost in front of the Walgreens. So dispatch puts out a description of the suspect, and me thinking it's a money robbery, or some type of other robbery where they just wanted stuff. I parked almost across the street, but a little bit. I was at the end of the block between the police department and Walgreens, and I was watching cars that were passing. The easiest route that I was thinking was they're just going to go all the way across Main Street out to the interstate, Highway 20, and then they're going to get on the highway and leave. And I was just waiting for that information to come from dispatch, and so I was watching cars pass and trying to build up that picture in my head of, okay, I just saw that car pass that dispatch now just put out. And so I was watching cars pass. Well, my buddy Ben that I just talked about, he had pulled in behind me, probably 30 feet behind me, and was already out of his car with his rifle. And he was going in on foot. And so as I'm watching cars, I look to my right and see somebody matching the description of the suspect walking towards me on the sidewalk. He wasn't pointing at me, but he was walking the same direction. What
was the description of the suspect? Remember?
Yeah, he was wearing, I think, a black. It was wintertime, so it was Carhartt, heavy black winter coat, and then khaki coveralls.
If you're wearing Carhartt, you're either a farmer, rancher, or a criminal.
Bad guy. Yeah. Yeah. So it was cold. So he had heavy boots on, coveralls, and a big heavy black jacket. Yeah. So once I see him and I'm like, oh, I think that's the guy, I get out of my car, go around to the front, and Ben was coming up behind me with his rifle and had already identified the guy and was already verbally engaging him with his rifle up. And so, I've got my gun out. Me and Ben are first on scene, and he's walking towards us. And
so you had your handgun out and Ben had his rifle.
Yeah, yeah. So I had my handgun out. I was, ready to go with it. Ben, as I remember, Ben had his rifle up, like he was ready to use it. And so the suspect walks towards us and then makes kind of a left turn into a bank drive-through between two buildings. And by this time now, we've got one of the county deputies, because the sheriff's office was directly across the street from the Walgreens. So one of the sheriff's deputies was at the office. He pulls in, and then one of our newest guys, who was just gotten off training, he was in the drive-through area, and then we had another guy around the backside. Actually, I think the newest guy, he was a reserve officer at the time, so he wasn't even full-time on the shooting. So the suspect is just walking casually away from us, like we're not even there. We're just talking to him, like, hey, show us your hands, you're under arrest. We're giving him commands. He's walking away, like, no furtiveness, just casually walking away, like we're not even there. And at one point, we get about 2/3 of the way into this drive-through area before it goes to an alley behind the bank, and the suspect stops. And we were kind of in a half circle, not quite a half circle. He kind of stops and faces me, and then everybody's kind of lined up to my right. There's nobody to my left, and the suspect stops, and he's just staring at me with that 1,000-yard stare. You talk about, you see people, you see it in the movies, where people are staring, at something or away at something.
Yeah, almost looks like they're trying to stare right through you or something.
He was looking in my eyes, but he wasn't reactive at all to what I was saying, what I was telling him to do.
Like they say, no one was home.
Nobody was home, dude. And it was the first time I'd truly seen it in my law enforcement career, and then realized that's what the 1,000-yard stare looks like. And I was telling him, like, hey, show me your hands. You're under arrest. Show me your hands. And he just stood there. And I remember thinking, like, his hands were tucked underneath his jacket, and he had this big, heavy Carhartt jacket on, and his hands were tucked under it, so I couldn't see it, and I wanted to see what was in his hands, right? There was no imprints of a weapon, nothing like that. I just couldn't see his hands because they were tucked up under his jacket. And I realized, like, I don't actually want him to show me his hands right now. I want him to turn around.
So was he physically reacting to you at all when you're making commands?
No, he was standing there looking at me, looking through me, and it was like nobody was home. He was present, but there was no emotion in his face, no emotion in his eyes. He was like hollow, is what it looked like.
Yeah.
So so then I realized like, hey, I don't want him to actually show me his hands. He's facing me, and I've got no cover. I'm in this drive-through. There's nothing between me and him. We're only 20 feet or so apart. This is not good for me. Nobody had cover actually. The guys to my right may have had a little bit of cover with like one of those pillars, but I don't know if they utilized it. I didn't look ever at them. And so I tell the suspect, I want you to turn around and face away from me, and then take your hands out.
Which is smart, because so many people just get used to yelling, "Show me your hands, show me your hands."
Yeah.
And they do that because they're stressed and they sound like a broken record.
Yeah.
The officers do that, and then they end up showing their hands with a gun in it. And so that's smart.
Yeah. So it kind of dawned on me like I don't actually want him to show me his hands, so that's why I told him, hey, turn around and then remove your hands. And he didn't do that. So the next thing I see him remove his hands from under his jacket, and then I sidestepped to my right and then started firing my weapon at him. At the same time, there was a volley of fire, and the next thing I know, my gun felt noticeably lighter, and I was carrying a SIG SP 2022, which is a double action 40 caliber. Which is it's kind of weird because that first trigger pull is really long and heavy. Yeah. And then after that, it's single action. So
it's a double action, single action firearm.
Yeah.
Like the 90s.
Yeah, I know, right? So I just started firing my weapon. As soon as I stopped firing, he's on the ground, and I noticed like the first actual thought that I had was that my gun felt noticeably lighter. Yeah. And they always talk about like how many rounds you shoot, and I had no idea. I didn't count. It was really, really loud, and my gun felt lighter, and that's all I could like remember like right as soon as it was done. So he was on the ground. I'm telling him, show me your hands, show me your hands. He's not moving. I think he kind of made some like, I think he had like an initial scream, and then after that he was just non-responsive. We could see he was agonal breathing, and so the gun was next to him, so we approached him, put him in handcuffs, and started rendering aid. Did
other officers fire as well?
Yeah, everybody that was there was 4 of us in the drive-through. All 4 of us fired at him.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And so, what was it specifically that you saw in his body movement that you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to shoot?
Yeah, it was the movement of his hands. I don't remember seeing a weapon, but the movement of his hands, coupled with the fact that we were dangerously close. There was no cover. His hands, he was non-responsive to commands.
Was he going into like a shooting stance, right? That's one thing. As a cop, you've had some training, you start to see a shooting stance, or the way somebody would hold a gun, or the way they would draw a gun.
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything like that. He actually took a step back. There was like a really kind of like low sidewalk. It was like 3 inches that was parallel to the building, and then the drive-through. He actually took a step back onto it, so his back was only maybe a foot or 2 from the wall, which I thought that was kind of strange. And then he drew his hands, and I just stepped to my right and then started firing at him.
Okay. And when you say you stepped to your right, what made you step to your right?
So we'd been trained to get off the X, which is a term that you and I are fairly familiar with. Mm-hmm. The goal is to interrupt their OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, act. So whenever you do something, they have to observe that you do it. They have to orient their brain to that, orient their body to that. Then they have to decide their next action. Then they actually have to perform that action. And so the thought process behind it was, if you move laterally, then that person that's trying to hurt you has to go through that entire process again. It takes a second maybe, but that's a second now you have to react to them and act. And so I had stepped off the line, stepped off the X.
And was that a far step, or just because I know, as a trainer, that's pretty hard to train properly, because a lot of times on the range, we've kind of almost gotten to the point where we don't really teach it a whole lot anymore, because when you have a bunch of guys shoulder to shoulder, it's like they're taking this little half-inch, 6 to 10-inch step. And I was like, well, that's really not doing you any good. Yeah. In order to get off the X, you really have to move off the X.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a step it was. It felt, it felt like a foot or two.
Yeah.
Like a normal step. It wasn't anything. I don't remember being like super aggressive.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. I don't have any video to go back and watch.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces that are part of that I don't really.
You just know you moved.
I know I moved. Yeah, I know I moved. There was I'd been trained to do that, and so at the range that was like built in, so that it was 100% muscle memory at a point of crisis when you have to do something. It's total muscle memory, but at the same time, I really think I'm a religious person. I really think that there was angels that kind of helped me. I want to say that I felt like a physical push, and then that also muscle memory to sidestep.
Yeah.
And then we shot and killed him.
Yeah.
So.
And do you know how many rounds were fired between everybody?
I think there was 28 rounds fired between us. I shot 10. I don't remember how many everybody else shot, and then I think you only had like 7 bullet wounds. Mm-hmm. So we missed a lot.
Yeah.
The distance that we were should have been 100% accuracy, but
what kind of distances?
I was probably 20 feet or so from him. I was the closest, and then from there it staggered in a kind of a circle out. Ben was the farthest that I'm aware of. He was parallel to the wall, so he would have been the farthest away. He had a rifle. Everybody else had handguns. So guys were all at different distances. Nobody was like up on line, right? Yeah. It was to my recollection. It was me, our reserve officer, the deputy, and then Ben.
So looking back on that now, do you feel like the guys behind you put you in danger if you would have fallen one way or the other?
No, I think there was enough distance between us that nobody was behind each other. We were all, it would be on a line, but it was a half circle line.
Yeah. Okay.
Something rough like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, we try to always teach, hey, if you got guys, if you're behind somebody else who's shooting, we want you to, what they call patch up, right? You want to try to get up to where you're shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's not always possible. But in a perfect world, that's what we'd like guys to do.
Yeah, and you see a lot of videos, where cops are in shootings and there's a guy that's in front of them, but the guy behind perceives the threat before the guy that's down does. And man, yeah, it's just, you got to be aware of what's in front of you. You know, if your buddy stands up abruptly and you're not paying, you're laser focused on your subject, you might end up shoot up your buddy. So. Yeah.
So, do you remember seeing your sights?
No.
Were you running irons at the time?
Yeah, we had iron sights. We didn't have optics. I don't remember seeing my gun at all. Mm-hmm. I don't remember seeing him. I think, I don't know if there was a moment of visual exclusion, if I closed my eyes just long enough to shoot. I don't know if I was so auditory focused that I remember hearing everything, but I don't remember seeing anything. So it leads me to believe what would have that? I probably just had closed my eyes while shooting. It feels weird to say that because it's hard to admit that. We always train like you gotta eyes open, eyes open, eyes open. And I was a believer in both eyes open, co-witnessing. And I would do that on the range. I tried to focus both eyes open, even with iron sights. And for whatever reason, I think I either had closed my eyes during it and shot, or I just had enough audio or visual exclusion that didn't see it. So
what kind of firearm did the bad guy have?
Yeah, this was weird. He had the same exact gun that we had.
Really?
Yeah.
So your gun was an issued gun?
Yeah, it was an issued gun. When we walk up to him and put him in cuffs, and I look over, only a foot or two from him, and I'm like, there's another gun that is our gun with the hammerback on the ground, and I'm like, who the hell put their gun down? Like, why would you put your gun down?
That sounds suspicious.
I was
right if we were in another part of the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this dude put his gun down. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I remember saying something like, "Hey, put your gun in your holster." Like, who didn't put their gun in their holster? They put their gun down to get hands.
Yeah.
No, just holster your weapon. And then I realized that it was actually his gun. He had used the same gun that we use.
Wow.
On us.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it happens.
Yeah. It was weird.
Certain guns are, if it was a Glock, you can say, everybody has a Glock.
Yeah.
But SIGs, especially that model. I'm sure back in the day it was probably a little more popular back in the day. But.
Yeah. And they're entry level firearms. They were polymer frame. I think we bought ours for about $400.
Yeah.
As an agency, so they weren't that much more expensive on the civilian market.
Yeah.
But yeah, that thought, I'm like, what are you doing? We just shot this dude, and there's somebody put a gun down. What are you doing?
I'll bet that's happened more than once.
Oh, probably.
Somebody decides to go hands on,
Yep.
put cuffs on. And that,
Yeah,
I'm
it
sure
was
that's
wild.
happened.
Yeah.
You see some crazy things on these body cam videos nowadays.
Yeah.
So tell me about, did you feel like your training leading up to that, was your training, do you think it was sufficient, or do you feel like now looking back that you lacked in training?
I think the training leading up to that point was sufficient. Yeah, especially that stepping off the line. In the investigation and after all this, I didn't know that he'd fired shots at us.
How many shots did he fire at you guys?
I think he cranked off 4 in about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
2.5, 3 seconds, something like that. And his were kind of in an arch, so I didn't know this until a couple days later when we walked through the scene with our attorneys. And there was a window that was behind me at an angle, and me and Ben were the kind of the 2 primary guys on it. The sheriff's deputy had his basically our 2 attorneys represented all of us on this. Ben and I were the only 2 that had FOPs, so we were the ones that were primary to him because we were the actually paying clients. And we're walking through it with our attorneys, and we're just kind of walking through where we're standing. They can see everything. There's still, I didn't know this, but they're like, oh yeah, there's bullet holes there. And there was one through a window that would have been directly at where I was standing. And for sure that sidestep saved my life. And I attribute 100% of that to God and my training.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, the spiritual side.
Yeah. Like I said, during the, when it came time to fire my weapon, like I said, I'd sidestep, but at the same time, I really think that there was an angel. We talk, if you're a person of faith, most people of faith believe in angels and people that are present around us that you can sometimes feel. Maybe you've had other experiences, and I truly believe that there was an angel that was positioned such that there was that gentle push, and then my training to sidestep that definitely saved my life. That first bullet, because I was the only person he was looking at. There was nobody. He didn't look to his right or left. He didn't assess his surroundings. It was me and him in no man's land, and that spiritual element where I think that an angel just gave me that push, and my training to sidestep. I think his first round was aimed directly at me, and he would have successfully hit me had I not moved out of the way.
Based on where you were standing at the time and where the bullet hole was in the window behind you.
Yeah, and then we can't talk about it. Anytime you're in a critical incident, you can't talk about it with the people that were there until you give your interviews. And so at the end of that week, so this happened on a Saturday afternoon. By like Thursday, I think we'd given our interviews. And so all of us that were there, we went and did our interviews and to the investigators, and then went out to dinner together, and we were able to freely talk about it. And Ben told me, he's like, I saw the suspect point his gun directly at you, and he said he had the thought, man, I hope he doesn't take my friend's life. And so Ben's experience was vastly different than mine. He didn't have visual exclusion, and so he saw, exactly what he was doing. And he said, so what Ben's statement was, he saw the suspect point the gun directly at me and fire.
And so you're saying 20 feet, that's like 7 yards, right?
Yeah.
7 steps.
Yeah, really, really close.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing. What other lessons do you feel like you learned from that, looking back on that? So
I think, until you've been in a critical incident like that where you have to take somebody's life, protect your own life, and the result is that you take somebody else's life. This happened fairly quickly after I realized I probably could have shot him a lot sooner than I did and not given him as many chances. but you have to work through the mental process of actually meeting the gram factors, to
And
be
is
able to take somebody's life.
And is that something that you, like, when you first, let's say you graduated from the academy, is that something that you thought about a lot? In my experience, I feel like only a small percentage of officers actually really think that that's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And most of them, and I might be wrong, but I feel like most of them don't think it's really going to happen to them.
Yeah, I had gone through that decision-making process early in my career. When this happened, I was on about 7 years or so. So I was the most senior officer on the incident. And I had made that decision that I would be able to do this, that I had decided prior to ever having to pull the trigger that I would be 100% on board with doing it if it ever came time to do it. So that decision-making, like, can I pull the trigger, can I not pull the trigger, that had already been made. And I think that was really critical in actually doing it when it needed to happen.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, almost immediately afterwards, in the days leading after that, I had realized I probably could have fired on him a lot sooner than I did, because he met all the gram factors. He'd committed a felony crime. He was a fleeing suspect. He was failing to obey commands. He wouldn't show us his hands. We knew there was a gun involved. We suspected he had the gun. There was a lot of other things that were like, I probably should have fired sooner. And so now, when there have been other times when, I've continued in law enforcement since that point, there have been other times when I'm like, if this dude meets this other criteria, I'm going to shoot him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you look at body cam footage and, even incidents that I know that have occurred around here. Sometimes you see cops sound like a broken record. They've already, they've met all the gram factors. There's also that, the ability, opportunity, jeopardy stuff we talk about. And guys are sound like a broken record. Put the gun down, or put the knife down. And I think sometimes just a lot of guys haven't really thought about that. What about, I know you talk about the religious aspect of it. I think it's important for everybody to have whatever, I say worship how you choose, but to at least believe in a higher power.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, from my experience, is the guys, you hear a lot about PTSD, that kind of stuff in law enforcement. I feel like the guys that I know that do better seem to the ones that have had, they may not be like religious every single day, but maybe they grew up with a good foundation as a kid, and they have a belief in God and the afterlife, that kind of stuff. And I feel like a lot of times those people have a better understanding, or they don't struggle with things when they see dead people, dead kids. I mean, not that they don't at all, but I just feel like sometimes they seem to handle it a little bit better. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. After as soon as the shooting was stopped, I was 100% reassured in my mind that what we had just done was totally justified.
Yeah.
There was no doubt where it was like, I don't know if we took this guy's life and we were allowed to. I had that reassurance and peace, that comfort, knowing that what we had just done was totally justifiable, and that we had, number one, been protected, and number two, that we had been justified to do what we did.
What would you say to maybe people who are in law enforcement and from a religious background feel like they're not sure if they could pull the trigger on somebody or not?
I would say if you don't know that you can pull the trigger on somebody, you should get out now.
Yeah.
I would tell my trainees that, when I'd have the first night in the car with me, the first thing that I would do is we'd get them all acquainted, with a couple guys that were working, and then we'd get on shift, and I would tell them, hey, have you decided that you can pull the trigger on and shoot somebody right now if you needed to? And I remember I had one dude, he's still working as a cop. He said, I was like, have you thought about this? And he goes, yeah, I think so. And I said, well, all right, well, we're going to pull over, and you take as much time as you need to and decide if you're going to be able to do this, because I need to know that you are fully committed to using a firearm on another human being if you have to.